Hello, lovely people, and welcome to episode 6 of the Blackbox Diaries with your hosts, Alex and Chris, back for another one to discuss a few of the current cybersecurity incidents and events that are happening out there right now. We will also be having a look at a few of your community questions that you have posted across our social media and also on our YouTube channel. And then if we get some time, we might bring back the LinkedIn cringe for this week and have a little bit of a Q&A about those with Alex and myself. Strap in. This is going to be a good one. And as always, if you like the content, please do like and subscribe and catch us on all of your podcasting platforms. All right. So we are now about to jump into a few of the articles that we've been reviewing and chatting about this week. However, I just want to start off with Alex. How are you, dude?
You know, you know what? I'm doing fantastic, Chris. Thank you for asking. How are you? How's work?
Work is absolutely flat out, if I'm being completely honest.
Okay,
It's extremely busy. I
it's
did
fair.
spend the day today at the Realms of Cyber conference up in Brisbane, which
Yeah.
was really, 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 really good. Um, a lot of really good conversations, obviously networking, a reasonably half decent ham and cheese toasty, moderately
Nice.
average coffee. But the people were good. The presentations were good. Saw some really good stuff around maritime security, train security, pen testing trains and train networks and stuff like that, as well as embedded device security. Yeah, huge shout out to the Realms of Cyber people
Sick.
because they organized a cracking conference. I think it was a bit pressed for time because every presenter had like 15 minutes to present. That's all they had.
Sure.
And then so it was really, really crammed, and they were jamming a lot into their presentations. I'd like to maybe see a little bit more time given to presentations going forward. So, and yourself, how's work? Doing some pen testing?
I have been doing some pen testing. It's been going pretty good. It has been going pretty good doing my thug this. I also kind of am in the process of restarting or giving new life to Aurora Cyber YouTube channel.
Yeah,
So
sweet.
go
Shout out
watch
to
it.
that. Go check it out. It's pretty good. You have some good content on there, so I'm looking forward to seeing what the rework looks like and where we get to with that.
Fair enough.
But yeah, go give that a like and a subscribe if you can. Support Alex. He's a smart dude, good dude, one of my best mates. Love him. But on that note, let's jump into the first article, which is essentially a US Army analyst charged with leaking national security data to China has pleaded guilty. Now, the interesting thing about this is the investigation started in 2022. Um, he was allegedly paid around $42,000. So,
Yeah.
for the documents he provided, sensitive and restricted US military documents, things that contained detailed information about weapon systems, military tactics, strategy, export controlled technical data, all sorts of stuff, including things that were, like lessons learned and things that they want to take back from, obviously, the war between Russia and the Ukraine. So I guess being an ex military person, this is right up your alley,
Sure.
Alex, because I'm curious as to, is this something that's commonly happening, and why do you think somebody of this rank would risk it all for a year's worth of salary?
Sure. That's a great question. The, I'd love to tell you and the viewers that this is not commonplace. I'll tell you this. Going into undisclosed data, I really can't. But understanding where this kid's probably coming from, right? We have to look at where these soldiers came from, right? Where it all started, and what we're trusting them to maintain in their frickin' in their brains. Uh, this is a sergeant in the U.S. Army, right? Corbin Schultz, I believe, is his name, and he apparently gave up a lot of sensitive information. But in essence, he never should have, in my opinion, right? Not the opinion of the U.S. Army. He never should have had this information in the first place. I believe the military is getting very lackadaisical when it comes to authorizing security clearance, and it's giving these clearances out like it's candy, right? And
Hmm.
not paying attention to who it's going to, what their jobs are. Does their actual day to day job require this level of clearance? Now, on the topic of nation states or rival nation states um, attempting to coerce our soldiers to give up information, that happens every day. I can guarantee you that happens every day. When I was in, I had several soldiers come up to me and be like, I got catfished or some dumb shit, right?
Yeah.
Just like, oh, so it's most oftentimes it's a female persona, right?
Hmm.
Attempting to get information from these young enlisted soldiers.
Right.
So, yeah, commonplace. Yes, it's commonplace that it's attempted, but I'm not going to say it's commonplace that the soldiers give it up, because one thing our enlisted ranks do very well is maintain their soldiers
Yeah, but I
and keep
mean,
them.
I guess, there's a lot of lessons learned here from, like employing basic data security and cybersecurity principles, like the need to
Sure.
know, clear desk
Yeah.
policy, all those types of things. Like, don't leave stuff around that's easily accessible. Don't provide excessive access to stuff that people just don't need to know. And
Sure.
then, lock it down with appropriate access controls. And I
Yeah.
mean, that's probably going to mitigate a lot of the technical risk of these particular things happening. But at the same time, I guess, being from Australia, it's not something that we have a lot of insight into, as general Australian public. I'm not a military person or anything like that.
Sure.
So pretty much all I see from my perspective, even having worked for, defense previously, you do see that there is a lot around patriotism and things like that in America. Like, it's a big thing that from our perspective that we see a lot of in the US is,
Sure.
US military, Republicans, those types of things that, all the classic stuff in the news are really like, America. So
Yeah.
like, I think I'm just curious as to what would drive somebody to give it all up for 42 grand.
Dude, that's that. Oh, bro, that's the question of the day. This kid E5, looking at his rank, he's a sergeant. He doesn't make a lot of money. I can of that I can assure you.
Yeah.
Um, so yes, if I was a sergeant when I was an E5, $42,000 would have been a huge benefit.
Yeah.
Hold on.
But I mean, it might be a huge, benefit, but it's kind of like a once-off benefit, because I guess there is a point at which you've got to realize, oh hey, like I'm leaking this stuff, I'm probably going to get done here.
Yeah,
um
yeah, yeah, but
and
but the thing is, man, like I get that, and there is like a moral issue with this, but in the
mm,
end, I can see why. I'm not saying that what he did would ever be considered okay, um, but E5s
yeah,
are broke as a joke, you
yeah,
know.
right, fair enough. And I get that. And I get, you don't know everybody's story, right? He might have debt, he
Sure.
might have gambling problems. You don't know these things. Again, those are just random throwaway things. I don't know if that's actually his situation or not, but
Sure.
you don't know people's stories. Sometimes they have things in the background that do that. But in all
Yeah.
honesty, I think that again, it comes back to some of the things we've talked about before. From a major, essentially military structure and one of the biggest militaries in the world, you expect better. Like, they should have been able
Yes.
to,
Yes.
stop it before these documents got leaked. I think, I guess one of the things that I find really interesting is that, you know, you know, we are in a world now where it's easier for them to share these things, but it's also that technology makes it easier to also track it and probably respond to it faster when these things are happening. If we have the right controls and the right technologies in place and we follow the right practices, we should be able to kind of cut these things off at the knees before they get bad, or before they even happen.
I love that prospect, and I adore you for having it. I just I don't know, man. I don't. I think we've had the ability to identify this stuff for a long time, and I think we're just failing.
No, I think military organizations, defense, government organizations, those types of
Yeah,
things, they just don't really optimize the technology that they use
no, they don't.
properly. Like, they have budgets and they have, investment, they have partnerships, they have
Sure,
technology vendors, they have everything that want to help to secure this stuff. But I think, in some places and in some way, they do, like, the scattergun approach. They just buy lots of things that they think is the gold standard, but don't really configure it appropriately to use it in the best way to secure their most critical data. And I think that, they can definitely do better here,
yeah,
and they should do better here. But also similarly, there should be a lot more training around the consequences of what's going to happen if you leak this
sure,
data, and there should be a little bit more around, vetting and background checking for people that, go into the military. I think it's pretty strong background checking in Australia and things like that, but we have had conversations around what it's like to join the military here versus how, easy it is in some other countries. So I
sure.
think if there was a little bit more around, the training aspect, and we always talk about the user awareness and stuff like that, I think, there could definitely be improvements there that will prevent this in the future.
So, out of curiosity, I know you did in the past have worked with defense, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether that be
Yep.
with the Australian defense or wherever.
Yep.
Um, when you went to work, assuming you actually went to a, you did you work on site or was it virtual?
Yeah. I was at a military base. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So when you went into your everyday office, were
Yep.
you authorized to have your phone with you?
No.
You were not. Okay. So
Nope.
that brings me to my next point. So when I spent time in the Pentagon, whenever I was going into the office, I had to put my phone into a locker that was
Yep.
built specifically to not authorize different signals. Um,
Yep.
and I could not enter the office with any electronics. So
Yep.
that's a huge plus. Policy is great. I love it. The problem a lot of times is the enforcement of policy.
100%.
There, yeah, there were a lot of times where I noticed I may be the only one who's following this policy,
Yeah.
right? Uh, That that is another big freaking issue that we find within the Department of Defense.
Yeah. And
Is
those things are small things to fix,
yeah,
like for me, right? It was the same thing. I'd go to work every day, but I remember, where I was working, there were instances where, like, we had contractors who would run, like the security gates and stuff like that. They were not actually
yeah,
military personnel unless the threat level changed, right? If
sure,
the threat
yeah,
level changed or there was a threat or something like that, the civilian contractors were moved out and then they were replaced by military personnel, and things became a little bit more tighter. But
sure,
to be able to get to where I was working every day was actually, ridiculously easy, to be honest, because
sure.
you were able to just kind of flash something that looked like a work pass, and these, contractors would just let you on base, right? And
Yeah,
then, but when you get to the area where I was working, 100%, we had lockers out the front. You had to put your phones, smartwatches weren't really a thing there, but phones, you had to put your phones in the locker. You had to put, you couldn't take laptops, you couldn't take anything, USB keys, those types of things you couldn't take with you.
sure,
The only thing you were allowed to use and was like essentially your desk phone and your dedicated PC on your workstation.
sure.
Um, a small change that would make that a little bit more secure, because I mean, there were times when I was sitting there just working away and I hear somebody's phone ring because they forgot that it was in their pocket. They just walked into
Ooh,
work.
yep,
Or
yep.
there were times when, um, a friend of mine, he came to work, he was working there, and he thought, oh, hey, like, I want to take that document and, move it to a different PC. So I'm just going to plug in this random USB key and do that. And then
Yeah,
that flagged on everything. And then he
sure.
obviously got his clearance downgraded and all that because he got basically, don't do that.
Yeah,
That's worse than just
that'll
having
end
your
it.
phone in there for a second, right? But a small thing that would change that is move the lockers behind the guard station and then
Sure.
give your phone to the guard when you go in, or
Yes.
make the guard ask the question, do you have any devices on you today that should be in the locker? And then you're putting more ownership back on that person to be doing the right thing, because
Sure.
then you just up the consequence, because the onus is now on you. You've put in more controls. If you stuff it up, this is what's going to happen. Your clearance is going to be downgraded. You're not going to have access to the base, like whatever, going to confiscate your devices, whatever those particular types of things are. And that's a small change. Like, you just need to move the lockers behind
Yeah.
security, and then put them in place to check more, as an
And
example.
and you're absolutely right, dude. I mean, that's such a simple and easy to make happen win, right?
Yeah.
But
But I think, yeah, no, but I think it kind of goes back to those fundamentals that we always talk about, that
yeah,
sometimes security doesn't require the most complex solution. It just requires minor tweaks to make a difference.
yeah,
And we do live in a world where we do quite overcomplicate it sometimes, but those minor tweaks and
yes,
those small tweaks might just make the difference between 11 documents being leaked and somebody throwing away their career for $42,000.
that's fair. Good point.
All right. The next article we will be covering in the next, I guess, major news topic is quite a big one if it's true and legitimate and goes through. And that is Reseda claiming a ransomware attack on the Washington Times. Now, they are selling the data apparently for 5 Bitcoins. There's no real confirmation of what the data is, but according to sources, the samples suggest that it is names, addresses, banking data, invoices, and license and social security numbers of journalists who work for the Washington Times. Now, obviously, that data comes with some significant risk, so it's interesting to see how this is going to unfold. And for those of you who don't really remember Reseda, they are the ransomware group that last year breached and leaked the data of the Spider-Man 2 developer, Insomniac Games, dumping 1.67 terabytes of data containing 1.3 million files, including many that appeared to belong to Insomniac's upcoming Wolverine video game. Now, if this is legitimate and the data is legitimate, journalist information probably would be worth quite a bit. What do you think, Alex?
It probably would be indeed. We're seeing a lot of stuff like this these days, man. And
Yeah.
the current price for that, so 5 Bitcoin. People need to understand that 1 Bitcoin, I think, what is it, like $60,000? That's a
Yeah.
lot of freaking money, and I'm just not sure like what their end state goal is. I see here on the article it does appear that the group is taking offers, so I would too, man. Bitcoin Bitcoin is expensive.
Yeah. So I guess, yeah, like, to your point, they're probably expecting, obviously the Washington Times is going to in some way try and get this data or purchase this data or pay some kind of ransom or whatever. But I guess it says that if nobody purchases it, or it hasn't been bought for these 5 Bitcoins, it's pretty much going to be published. So I guess, we talked about data breaches a lot in this context because it's happening all the time, like,
Sure,
honestly. And I
yeah,
think, there's no organization that's really defending themselves properly. I mean, obviously you have the big companies that preaching their services after a lot of data breaches and everything like that. And I think
yeah.
some of them are doing a good job, but this is just showing that it doesn't matter, like if you're big, if you're small, we've talked about some of the small ones. Now we're talking about obviously something that's quite a big one. It doesn't really matter who you are. There's a good chance you're going to experience a data breach in some way. So I'm interested to understand, what does the Washington Times have by way of actual cybersecurity incident response,
Ooh,
and who are their partners that can help them get through this from that perspective? Because it seems
sure.
like there's not really been anything from the Washington Times about this, so they're not really saying anything. But it looks like it's probably going to blow up from a dark web perspective.
Yeah, I agree. I think it probably will. And on the topic of like, throwing the data out there for bid or for auction, um, like I was telling you earlier when we were discussing the article, this is what I would do, right? If I was a, cyber criminal, um, it's actually rather smart where the attacker in this case is saying, okay, so I'm going to sell this to the first person that throws 5 Bitcoin at me. Washington Times, you better pay up or somebody else will, right? And worst case scenario, it just gets published publicly. I think the attacking group understands that it is highly unlikely that someone outside of the Washington Times would actually pay 5 Bitcoin for the leaked information. It's not going to provide enough data to that individual who would pay. It has nothing to do with the Washington Times to, make up for the each Bitcoin is like $60,000 times five. It's just not worth it. But the attacker knows that, um, but is banking on the Washington Times saying, "Okay, yeah, we got you, keep it," right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah,
But I think, realistically, the data that they've got, it's obviously sensitive data. Some of it can be used for further attacks, or, identity theft and that sort of stuff. But, I mean, that is, if they have a heap of data, the information out there doesn't really show how much they've got, or how little they've got. So
sure,
I think, realistically, from that perspective, without going into a little bit deeper and going out to the auction site and everything ourselves, which we could do to bring you more information. If you want more information about it, let us know. We can have a look into it for you.
sure,
But I think, honestly, yeah, you're probably right that the cost in this instance, it outweighs the risk, really, of the data
sure.
getting out there.
Yeah, I concur. Now on the topic of security, though, um, how do you think that the Washington Times could have thwarted this type of ransomware attack?
You know, that's an interesting question, because there wasn't really a lot of information
Yeah,
about it, but I'm probably going to suspect that, given that the information says that it targets journalist information and journalist data, it was probably a journalist that was the subject of the initial compromise.
fair.
I think that's probably a safe assumption, and realistically, it's probably going to be one of your common attack methods. Maybe click the link, plugged in a USB key,
Yeah,
left their laptop unlocked at the cafe. Could be connected to that cafe's Wi-Fi. Love a good Starbucks Wi-Fi hack. But, like, as you would too. You love your Starbucks, Alex. But
yes, yes, I do.
I think, like, it's going to be something like that led to that, and then obviously resulted in this, and the ransomware. But there was nothing really that pushed the information out there to say what specifically happened. But
Yeah,
what could they have done? All the usual stuff. But let's just start with better. They could have done better.
sure, sure, that's fair. I, I I always assume it's the human vulnerability, right?
hundred
Somebody got
percent.
an email, it clicked it, and boom goes the dynamite. You get what you see here in the article.
Yeah, no, one
Uh,
hundred percent, 100%.
yeah.
And realistically, the Washington Times is not small. It's not small.
Oh
Like,
no.
you've got money, you've got
Yeah.
technology that you can invest in, you've got people that you can bring in to sort stuff out, for sure.
Sure.
Do better.
I concur. Do better. Do better. I love it.
All right. And now we have one that is a little bit interesting and probably something that we didn't expect to be hearing about this week. And that is a ransomware attack on a farmer kills her cow and her calf. Now, what actually happened was the farmer in, I believe it was Switzerland, uses a number of robots and automated machines and things like that to milk over 70 of his cows. And these robots and technologies that he has in place also monitor and manage the vitals of each of those cows so that he can also see both milk production, but obviously the ongoing health and everything like that of his animals that he looks after. Now, he didn't realize there was actually a problem until his third party called to tell him that the systems weren't working. They weren't collecting any data because of a ransomware attack. Now, the threat actor was demanding $10,000 USD in payment, which he obviously refused to pay because ultimately he was talking about one computer that pretty much ran these systems on his farm. Now, those systems would also pick up information for him, which would be essentially, different vitals, but also able to tell him which cows were pregnant and whatnot with calves. So that way he could know which ones needed medical attention and whatnot. And obviously, in this instance, the technology being unavailable, he was unable to see that, subsequently unable to save the cow and the calf in this instance. So
Sure.
over to you, Alex. What do you think about ransomwaring a cow farmer?
Well, first off, we talked about this article before we jumped on here. That $10,000 demand for the ransomware attack. First off, that's a very interesting price for me because most of the time, like we talked about earlier in this episode with the Bitcoin, I mean that's one Bitcoin being at $60,000, 10K is pretty lowball. And farmers, I'm not sure about in Switzerland, but farmers here in the United States, they make a pretty penny. They got to pay for that ass ton of land that they have.
Yeah,
So if you ask me, I think that threat actor is likely somewhat local. And I think this is, it almost seems like a trial attempt. I know it says here Burchard decided not to pay the ransomware group as he could work with his 70 cows without his milking data, as the milking robots are able to operate without an internet connection. So that would be funny to watch, right? If they could
true.
make the, I mean, imagine 70 cows just get all day long to turn into little skinny
Yep.
cows. Anyway, um, yeah, I think that I think the 10,000 is a low ball, and I think that it's a new threat actor. I don't think that they've
Or a
been
young
a
one,
part.
maybe.
Yeah, yeah, young. I think that's better stated. Yeah, a youngster, trying to get some money, see if his attack works. We've all been there in some senses, right?
Yep.
Uh, but what I'm kind of weird about here is it says that the system gives farmers feedback on cows that are pregnant. As a result, a calf of one of the cows was put into peril without Bircher's knowledge. Yeah, yeah, but was it like, what is that? I'd love to see the statistics of, or yeah, the stats on that system that is giving you real time data about a
True.
pregnant cow.
It's definitely, I've not heard of that, but, I
Yeah,
think there's a lot of technology I haven't heard of that's,
that's
I
fair.
was going to say
That's
that,
fair.
that's cool, but I'm not 100% sure that is cool technology. I mean, for
Yeah.
farmers, for sure. For me, pretty useless. But I guess this also just goes back to, it really doesn't matter how big or small you are. Like, you could get targeted by any random that just wants to throw something out there. Because as you say, 10 grand is pretty small. Could
Yeah.
be a young person, first time, whatever, doing it to see if they know what they're doing. They went after something easy because, again, if we're talking like robots and machines here that are milking cows, you're not talking your traditional fundamental IT components. You're talking now probably OT style
Yeah.
components that, even major corporations don't secure properly these days. So
Right.
a small farmer is not really going to do that himself either. And I think that it does show that you need to make sure that you are doing the right things, even if it's one computer that runs all this stuff. You need to make sure it's secured. You need to
Yeah.
make sure that everything is kind of locked down and it only does what you need it to do. And I mean, he said it, everything runs without internet access anyway, so set it all up on a local network with no internet access and you'll still be able to get the data, right?
Sure. So
um
let's say that you have one computer that controls all of this stuff, right? I'm certainly no farmer, so I don't know what all that stuff is.
yeah.
But Chris, do you have any like recommendations that an or let's say a small business like a farmer, um, what they could do to a singular system to kind of help with security?
All the same sort of stuff, dude.
Okay.
Honestly, like, we know that, you know that, I know
Yeah.
that, but I think the thing is, a small farmer probably doesn't know that, evidently from this, but it's the same stuff. Like, if it's one PC, realistically in his house, like, just secure it the same way you'd secure your normal personal PC. Check on
Sure.
your anti-malware, your antivirus, your EDR, whatever you want to use.
Yeah.
Make sure it's patched and up to date. Make sure you're running the latest operating system. Make sure if you've got custom software, which it looks like it probably does, that you have the
Yeah.
latest updates from the vendor there as well, and you make sure that the vendor's doing the right thing from a security perspective, and that you're putting secure software on there, not just rando stuff that could expose you more. And then do the right thing. Like, realistically in this instance, if that's the one PC that runs all of his stuff, as I said, he said that it can all run without internet access, so just get rid of
Right.
internet access on it. Like,
Yeah.
you don't really need it. And then similarly, if you have it, what you probably find in these types of situations is that it's because it's one person, small organization. That PC that runs all that robots and the technologies and everything like that, probably the same PC he uses to do his banking, probably the same PC he uses for Facebook, probably the same PC he uses for everything else. Download everything on there. He looks a bit older. Maybe he downloaded LimeWire on there too back in the day. Who knows? Could be the same PC.
Sure.
Um,
Sure.
I don't know. Like, that's a throwback and probably unlikely, but you don't know what he's installing on there or using it for. But segregation from obviously the personal PC and the business PC.
Sure.
100% probably the first step he needs to look at, and then cut the internet on that one if it can run that way to do everything and it doesn't need internet access. Just
Sure.
don't give it internet access. You're pretty much eliminating it there. Like, it's always the running joke for us in cybersecurity, isn't it? Like, oh, well, how do I make this secure? I'll just turn the internet off, all of it,
Too easy.
fixed. Yeah. So, but definitely interesting. I didn't think, that originally we'd be talking about furry hacktivists, and now I didn't really think we'd be talking about ransomware and data breaches affecting the health of cows and their ability to be milked.
Yeah, bro, I'm still a little bit shady on it. I don't know. Did this? Yeah, okay, a calf of one of the cows was put into peril because of the ransomware. I don't know, man. There's so much more information I need to make a call on that.
No, I get what you're saying, but at the same time, it probably does actually highlight a really interesting point that
Sure.
it doesn't matter what your business is
Yeah.
anymore. We are all so heavily reliant on technology
True.
that we forget about the manual processes of things, and it helps. I think this is an example, right, of two things. One, the technology enabled him to obviously scale up his business, right? Because
Sure.
instead of having to go and physically and manually milk, say, 10 cows, he's
Sure.
implemented technology. I can't believe I'm talking about this, but he's implemented technology that goes and milks 70 cows, right? So his
Yeah.
business has grown, but he hasn't really sustained the technology through that growth. He became reliant on that technology to support
Sure.
that growth. So he is so heavily reliant on those 70 cows getting milked and all the vital signs coming from them into that technology that when it becomes unavailable, he doesn't have the manpower and the capacity to go out and physically check every single cow, right? And
Yeah,
so, from that perspective, it's an example of how all businesses now are so heavily reliant on their technology that they really need to take security seriously and availability of those systems seriously.
yeah,
And this is an example that when you scale too quickly with a heavy reliance on technology, sometimes the manual processes and the ability to run a business without that technology, they don't
sure.
follow on the same trajectory.
I concur. That
Now,
that is accurate, Chris.
yeah. Now, the second part of that is, if we look, or the second thing that this highlights is he was getting asked to pay 10,000 USD ransom, right?
Yeah.
Now, with the cow passing away and the calf passing away and everything that went into this, he's saying that this basically cost him nearly 7,000 USD. So you're now
Yeah.
talking like, 70% of the ransom is what it cost him anyway in business operations. So, I mean, I guess in some situations, and we've talked about this before, in some situations, it makes sense to just pay the ransom.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, I'm not,
Maybe.
I don't support it. Obviously,
Sure.
I'm not the sort of person that would,
Sure.
but it's like Jai and I mentioned, and you mentioned in the
Yeah.
episode with Jai that we wouldn't, but we would understand if somebody did.
Okay.
And
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
this is like a situation where like if he did pay it, you would understand why,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
he would have maybe saved his production and saved a whole bunch of other stuff and being able to milk the cows faster or whatever if he paid it, and probably avoided that catastrophe because now he's out of cow and now he's out of calf.
Yeah. Hey, do you watch The Boys, Chris?
Of course.
Okay. So I haven't been able to stop thinking about Homelander just milking the shit out of that cow and then drinking it.
Exactly. Yeah.
He's
Imagine Homelander and the boys, bro. Imagine Homelander and the boys if he had the technology to milk 70 cows. Exactly. But yeah, absolutely did not expect in my whole cybersecurity career I would be talking about cows getting milked linked to ransomware. But here we are.
Yep.
All right, we've come to the time of our podcast where we will be discussing some of the community questions that you have posted to us on our social medias, that you have also put onto our YouTube channel, or you have reached out to us directly to ask us the question. Now, the first question that we do have, Alex, which I will throw to you, is from June, who posted this
Okay.
on the YouTube channel. Basically, the comment says, "Thank you for another awesome video. I'd like to hear more on the application of AI in cybersecurity. Vulnerabilities change rather quickly, and older training data sets can become erroneous in the matter of weeks. On top of that, 100 developers have 100 different ways of writing the same functionality. I imagine that makes getting enough data to train the AI models very difficult. How are companies that are training these AI scanners getting over this hurdle?"
Whoa.
Yeah, it's a big question.
It is. I think it's important to start this off with, and I hear a lot about AI, right? Like the company I work for is all about it. Like, oh yeah, AI, we need to figure out a way to incorporate it. And that's great, right? I mean, AI is an emerging positive and an emerging negative or threat. But it's important for everybody to understand that as of today, being the 20th of August here in Virginia, there has been no automated artificial intelligence based uh, pen testing tool or hacking tool that is efficient. Like, people are working on them, but they're not efficient. But I think what this question seems to be asking is maybe how organizations are testing AI platforms, because
Mm,
that is what the company I work for currently is actually looking to do. because a lot of clients now are reaching out. A lot of organizations are like, man, we want to incorporate AI in our productivity day to day. And I think that's brilliant. But how do we test that AI to make sure that what we're doing is actually secure? And that's a hurdle, June, that I think is going to probably have a lot of visibility and have a lot of development and innovation over the next 5 years. Every company is working on it, dude. All of them. That is priority one. Either it's about productivity or security, one of those two. And I think we're going to see a lot. But as far as getting over those hurdles, man, uh, I am uncertain how that's going to take place, but I think we'll know within the next 12 to 24 months. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, it's a tough one because AI,
Yeah.
it is everywhere, and we talk about
Yeah.
obviously the impacts of that from a cybersecurity perspective, from a threat actor perspective, and from an organizational perspective, and I think it's really funny because I heard a thing, recently, another person talking about it that, obviously AI is here to stay, whether we like it or not.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
organizations that want to use it, in particular security organizations, obviously, Alex, you and I both work for security companies and, have our own things going on and everything like that. And AI is a big supporter of that because,
Yeah.
we embrace it securely. I think from an organizational perspective, you're going to have people in the organization that use the AI anyway, whether it's ChatGPT or something else, or just generating logos or anything like that. It's going to be super important about you embracing that and allowing them to do it. If you fight against it and you don't essentially lean into it, you're probably going to miss a lot of, productivity and time saving tools, but you're also
Sure.
going to start to push people down the path of doing it anyway, and probably less securely.
Sure.
Now, from a security perspective and the application of AI in cybersecurity, I've been to a lot of conferences recently, and I can't think of any product or any organization or any vendor that I spoke to that didn't tell me that their product had AI. Now, is it the true form of AI, or is it just some
Mm,
kind of sort of advanced, algorithm, or like
yeah.
whatever, pretty much you can say it has AI these days because it might not now, but it might in the future,
They throw
and
GPT-4 in there.
yeah, and who are we to challenge them on the floor
Yeah.
of a conference, right? When they sort of saying that, but every single security vendor these days says that they have it incorporated. I think that the application of that is going to differ between each vendor, and I think that we should be asking questions around what does that mean, how does it do it, how does it secure my data when it does do it,
Sure.
how does your application work in a way that's going to enhance the security of my business? It's not going
Sure.
to expose me. Because one of the biggest things that, from a data leak perspective is people copy and pasting things and chucking it into chat GPT-4. It's a learning
Sure.
model. So you're pretty much just giving it your sensitive data to learn from, and
Yeah.
then, putting that out there, and it's going to pull that. Right. So,
Yeah.
I think that how do they train it and how do they get over that? Again, that's really going to come down to your development life cycle, and obviously the objectives of what you want the product to do. And then you
Sure.
get into a little bit of a deeper thing around, your software development life cycle and everything that goes into that. You're right about 100 developers having 100 different ways to do it, but
Yes.
that won't necessarily be the case if you standardize how it's being done in the business.
That's fair. That's fair. And I think it's important. You brought up, when you and I, right, when we work together on some projects, we do like to incorporate artificial intelligence, or what we call artificial intelligence today, which is really just an incredibly fast Google scanner that is named GPT 4.0. But it's great, right? It does come in handy for a lot of people. But Chris did say, this is for our viewers. Chris said that we do it securely, and I kind of want to, June. I don't want you to get angry with me for saying I don't know how to be secure. But what we mean by that is every product that we develop using AI as a helping agent is vetted from a human aspect, if that makes sense. So if I had to identify that single point of failure of utilizing AI in an unsecure manner, it would be the best example would be asking ChatGPT to produce coding with sensitive data and posting that right in GPT, throwing it into a program, starting that program up. You get lucky it works, and then throwing it onto freaking Google Play. Right? That would be an incredibly unsecure practice if you did not have a programmer vetting the data that GPT, in this case 4.0, came up with. But Chris, yeah, you nailed it on the head, man. That was great points.
Yeah, I think um, using it to like you've got to remember it's a tool.
Sure.
It's not a replacement. It's something that's going to augment what you do. It's going to be something that supports what you do, and it's going to be something that enhances what you do.
Yes.
It's going to be a time saver. It's going to be, an increase to productivity and efficiency, but it's not going to replace that human element. Alex and I are both pen testers, both red teamers. We do that sort of stuff. So if we develop something and we use things, to enhance our products from an AI perspective, we still pen test it. We still look at it from a security perspective. We still manually go through it to make sure
Uh-huh.
that it's done right. But also at the same time, there is a lot of stuff that needs to go into learning how to use AI properly and
Yeah.
securely. And that means also, for example, not just going into ChatGPT 4 and saying, can you develop this script for me? It's going in there and saying, can you develop this script for me, but also make it secure? And then you're
Sure.
already kind of eliminating some of those pieces that you're going to have to look at manually, but you obviously cross check and validate that anyway.
Yeah, you better believe it. You better believe it. All right. What is question number 2, Chris?
All right. Question number 2, which is going to be one that I know that you love, Alex,
Oh,
that
yes,
you're going to
yes.
think is amazing, is physical penetration testing still a thing? And is it worth doing a physical penetration test? We are a fully in office working organization and don't have
Ooh,
many remote workers. In the case of our remote workers, is physical security a consideration we should make at home offices?
absolutely. Absolutely. Physical security is absolutely essential. Okay? I don't care what's going on in cyberspace. Whatever. Anybody could try and attack the human vulnerability, right? It would be too easy to walk into your office building, right? Build rapport with personnel that are operating within the office building. Find some port, right? Some port somewhere in there, because I'm sure there is one.
Yeah.
Plug in a device, gain access to the network, and operate from home, right? It also comes down to we've got things like, I believe it's a USB rubber ducky by Hack 5, right? They came up with a concept, and now your generic hackers out there are just creating their own USBs where they don't have to pay a giant amount, and they're just deploying these things as keyboards, right? You plug it in, computer thinks it's a keyboard, computer runs a command, sends a reverse shell. I mean, yes, physical security is essential because those types of threats exist. Physical security is important because, like we discussed the first article, where that U.S. Sergeant was able to gather information from within likely a SCIF setting and push it to a Chinese threat actor.
Mhm.
I mean, yes, please, please, please. Now, let me give you some recommendations. Physical security, cameras, right? Cameras are imperative. If you don't have cameras, you're not going to be able to positively identify the threat actors or follow patterns of misconduct. If you you should not have open Ethernet ports, right? You should not have open Ethernet ports that somebody can just swing by, throw a Raspberry Pi on the wall and then plug that shit in, and then it looks like just a generic device on the wall, right? These are all important things. Locks on doors. Like in the Pentagon, like we were talking about earlier, you need to have security on the doors that lead to
Mm.
sensitive information. Those are a few recommendations. Chris, what do you got?
Yeah, physical security is an interesting one. I've done a lot of physical security assessments. It's definitely something that organizations do and they should consider even
Sure.
still.
Yeah.
I think I've talked about, I think it was the episode with Jai when I talked about, the laptops being stolen from the guy in the high vis vest down at,
Yes.
one of
Yeah.
the offices and stuff like that. Physical security is something that can and should be done better. There's a lot of things that get done in, large major organizations, even in the government. And I touched on that. We touched on that about the military one.
Yeah.
Obviously, the physical lockers not being in the right place, not being checked on by, the security guards and all those types of things, and the processes not really being there to support that. Now, I believe that there is always going to be some kind of way, if the physical security controls are relaxed, that you're going to be able to get in a technology based way as well, right?
Sure. Yeah.
In a logical way. So I think that there are a lot of things that can be done, but there's a lot of things that are still not done right. Tailgating, leaving stuff on printers, leaving stuff on desks, leaving USB keys around, leaving phones unattended, leaving laptops unlocked at Starbucks, which I said before as well. Connecting to, Wi-Fi's and stuff like that, ducking down to the cafe and thinking that it's all good to just walk up to to order your coffee and wait for that while your laptop's unlocked sitting over there.
Ooh,
All
danger,
you need is,
danger.
as you say, rubber ducky to just plug that in it and you're all good, right? Now, obviously you do need the basics, the cameras, the locks and everything like that. And realistically, let's put it this way, whether it's from a cybersecurity perspective or from a physical security perspective, you don't necessarily need the gold standard. Like it's good to have the gold standard, but you don't need the gold standard. I remember very early in my career, somebody said, you don't need to be the most secure. You just need to be more secure than your neighbor. Because if you have a much better deterrent, you have cameras, you have fences, you have security screens, you have all the things that go with that, but your neighbor has none of that, it becomes a lot easier for them to go and hit your neighbor than it does for them to hit you. Now,
It's fair.
applying that principle at your house, realistically, I think people need to do better to secure their houses anyway, particularly here in Australia, because the crime, particularly in Queensland, where I'm from, is it's on the rise, and a lot of people aren't securing their houses properly. They leave their garages open, they leave their front doors unlocked, they leave all sorts of things open, cars open, and everything like that. Physical
Yeah.
security at home is super important. What if you don't secure your car, but your work laptop's in there?
Sure. Sure.
You've just lost a bunch of data.
Yes.
Similarly, your house gets broken into, you have your laptop, you have everything in there. Do better. Like, there's nothing wrong with having a laptop lock at home and locking your laptop down to your desk. So, or asking your employees to do that, having the right, encryption on the devices as well to make sure that if something does happen, they can be wiped and locked down and all that sort of stuff.
Fair.
Physical security, 100% super important in the office, super important in the home office, super important for you in your everyday life. Protect yourself, protect your family, protect your workplace. All right, Alex, the third and final question of today's podcast is, with the rise of electric vehicles, interconnected vehicles, planes, trains, etc., how is the threat landscape changing for everyday services and people that use these devices or these vehicles? I might take this one,
Go for it.
being an electric vehicle owner myself. Now, Alex and I have had a discussion about this, and it's probably going to be a healthy debate that's going to last the ages between the two of us, because Alex is of the belief that it's not on the vendor to make sure that it's secure, whereas I believe that it is. Now, the reason that I believe it is up to the vendor and the manufacturer to make it secure is I know that my car receives all of its updates, all of its software patches, and everything like that when I return home and I park it in my garage and it connects to my Wi Fi. I personally can't apply those patches. I can only control whether I schedule the install of the patch or whether I delay the update or whatnot. Now, um, obviously, I always install the patch and everything like that, but all of those features, enhanced security and everything like that, comes from the manufacturer, particularly when you're talking about things that require you to install apps on your phone, require you to connect these devices to your Wi-Fi, all that sort of stuff, right? Now, the threat landscape is changing with Wi-Fi hacking and Wi-Fi devices. You know, obviously Flipper Zero, all that is out there. It was shown that Flipper Zero can be used to break into Teslas. It was shown that it can be used to attack Teslas. There was also obviously bug bounties with Tesla, all that sort of stuff. There was the guys that, you know, that I can't remember off the top of my head, but the group of guys that showed that they could take over the controls of a Tesla. They got like 250K each off Elon Musk and a free Tesla each for showing him that they could basically do this. So yes, the threat landscape is changing. The risks are there, particularly when you talk about trains and train control systems and how trains are now interconnected using similar technologies to that. And then adding to that, I did have a client that had interconnected planes. Now, what actually happened with that was they would be able to take the plane out, fly it around, do all the stuff that they do with the plane, and drop people off, go internationally, come back. When they park in the hangar, that plane automatically connects to Wi-Fi, and it is able to be updated and serviced and managed over Wi-Fi and everything like that. Now, I believe that it was a Boeing, and they have a standard for how that's to be connected. But when I did quiz them on that, they hadn't updated that or changed the standard on how that connects in 5 years.
Oh, wow.
So the threat landscape is changing because now, you know, obviously with those Wi-Fi attacks, you know, pineapples, like everything out there at the moment. Yeah. Imagine being able to, you know, set up a rogue access point that plane connects to, and you've installed malware on it, and you ransomware a plane, right? And that ransomware hits midair. What's going to happen?
Yes, they're going to pay it.
Likely, right? You know, and I'm not trying to give anybody out there ideas, right? But you know, the threat landscape is most definitely changing. What can we do as everyday people? Make sure that you are patching it. Make sure you are updating it. Make sure if you have things like a Tesla, you're using like the digital key. Make sure if you're not using if it's not a Tesla and you do have keys to other cars that have interconnectivity and things like that, you're not storing the keys in a locations like close to the door, close to the garage, or anything like that, where flipper zeros and all that can pick up the signal and replicate the signal to break into the car. Tuck them away in your bedroom, tuck them away in Faraday cage, whatever you want to do at home to make sure that they, you know, can't be replicated. But all right, now that brings us to the end of the Blackbox Diaries season 1, episode 6. Covered off a few interesting topics. Alex and I didn't get time to cover everything that we wanted to, but hopefully you found some value in it. Hopefully you got some interesting information out of it, particularly how cows are milked by machines, and without those machines, critical things can happen. So I'll leave it with you. I'll leave it with you to decide if cow milking machines should be considered critical infrastructure or not. You know, everybody needs milk for their coffee. On that note, as I've said before, if you enjoy what we're doing and you want to support us, please like and subscribe. Reach out to us if you want to get any of these cool stickers. If you want to get any t-shirts or anything like that, we can arrange something for you. And yeah, please drop a comment, drop us some questions for next week, drop us anything you want us to review or talk about. If you have any tips, tricks, or hints that you want us to share with the community as well, we're happy to do that. Until then, stay safe online, everybody, and we will see you next week.